Erwin, welcome to Decoding Success, brother. I'm really hyped for this. Like this is gonna be a good conversation, man. I appreciate you joining us, man.
I'm honored to be here. I know we've been trying to get this together for quite some time, but I I guess the right word is that I'm finally have some time to breathe, to
Mm.
be able to then also be here presently, perfectly present for you, and also maybe 90% pain free. So
Okay, we'll talk about that. But I mean, at the end of the day, all happens in divine timing, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it's that's a lot to unpack in itself. I guess I'll kick it off with that question. I mean, I didn't plan to go down that route, but divine timing. What does that mean to you? Like, how do you accept the timing of the way your plan has unfolded?
I've been always been intuitive. I think I was raised in a family, but also in society that allowed for me to listen to my gut
Mm.
a lot. And particularly because my father was massive in the martial arts, and I found myself beginning martial arts at the age of 7, learning meditation at the same time. And then by the time I was 12, I was teaching meditation and martial arts. And so I think through the gift of martial arts and the curiosity that I ultimately had of wanting to then know more, it allowed me to be patient, but
Mm.
also listen. And part of that too is, coming from the Philippines, very religious. And so they teach you patience and they teach you divine intervention. But I think as I've grown older and my spiritual practice has got a bit more diverse, it's gonna allowed me to delineate between what is divine intervention, what is intuition, and what is the path that you take, knowing that divine intervention is about to happen, and it's up to you whether you want to listen to it to get to that direction or not.
I mean, my first question based off of that, which it was very beautiful, I appreciate that, is how the hell do you teach patience? Because I need to learn that. I mean, listen, just growing up in New York as a millennial, like everything is at the fingertips, everything's on demand. I mean, I was spoiled my whole life, so it's like, give me, give me, give me now. How do you teach someone patience?
It's interesting that you say, number one, I kudos to you for admitting that you are an impatient millennial. Like, not many millennials will admit to that. That's number one. But number two, and growing up in New York, you literally have the world at your fingertips, and
Exactly.
literally out the door, you step outside the door, and you can have every language available to you if you want to learn it. You can have every food type that you want to try. You can learn about every possible culture if you want to try and experience it as well. I think growing up in the initial part of my life, of my conscious life, as a, how you say, maybe 4-year old boy in a city called Davao in the Philippines, where
Mm.
my only, I guess, real friends besides my immediate family and my cousins, that we all lived in a little compound, was the books that my grandmother had in her house, that were Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books, right next to Encyclopedia Britannica. And I'm sure not many millennials even know what Encyclopedia Britannica is, and the volumes of books that talked about the world and the different things that were happening in the world, history particularly. And so I was always curious. And for me, I knew that there were things that I wanted to see and do, but I was living in, at that time, a small town in the Philippines.
Mm.
You have nothing but patience. You have no choice but to be patient. And because life was simple, you learn it along the way. I mean, even when I was in school, the games that I used to play were made of, stones and marbles and the dirt, and even a period of time playing with spiders and in matchboxes and letting them wrestle each other. I mean, that was fun. And I think
Mm.
because there was not that sense of immediacy, but rather being present, it gave me the ability to learn patience. Plus the fact that, because growing up Catholic, it was part of what I needed to do as part of being
Yeah,
Catholic. It's
sure.
you have to learn how to be patient. So
Sure. You used the term that I'm really curious to understand what you meant by this. You talked about, your conscious life, quote unquote. Are you referring to that as times you can remember? Like, what would unconscious life be? Is that like when you're a baby?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
conscious life for me, meaning that when you begin your understanding of what life is around you.
Mm,
And there's obviously different elements to that as you get older. And as I've gotten older and been able to experience life in many different ways, it's helped me gain even more consciousness
yeah.
rather than just the pure fact of what is. Now you begin the awareness of what's deeper that you can't see.
Mm,
And like I said, maybe the thought process of just something you can remember is what it begins with, and it's the time that you can recall as clearly as possible. And I think that's what I maybe right now will define as my conscious knowing life.
what's your first memory? This is a question I've
Ooh.
done 300 plus episodes. I've never asked this question before. What is the first thing you remember about your life?
Ooh, you know, that's an interesting one. I've thought about this before. I think I've been asked about this before. I'm part of multiple personal growth communities and programs, and we get deep and really intimate with regards to how we ask our questions with many of my communities. And so I think for me, when I was asked this, I think for me, one of the earliest memories for me that I can be that is so vivid could possibly be running around in really my grandmother's house and in the Philippines, and remembering a dog we had. It was a black lab named Brutus, and
Great name.
Brutus, that was a black lab, and also, alongside that, we had like geese in my grandmother's house for some strange reason, and I remember these geese like chasing after me. I mean, they were they were rabid. I don't know why. And so there was Brutus. We had a lot of animals, and within my grandmother's like outdoor, and we had cats that were stray. We had Brutus, which was a black lab. We had geese and hamsters and all that stuff. And I think at one point in time, I even had a pet piglet.
Mm,
By no means that my grandmother had a farm. I mean, we did, but this was actually her house that was like in the city of a town, I guess of a province. Like, so if the province is really rural, this was the main city in that
sure.
rural town. So,
How old were you?
ooh, 5 maybe.
5. My first memory was when I was in kindergarten, and I mean, it's really hard to put a timeline to these things,
Yeah.
right? Like you even just said maybe. I think my first memory, and it's so crazy to think about how memories are stored, but I was in kindergarten, and I'll never forget that I had a crush. I had a crush on this girl in my class. Her name was Stephanie. Um, we went to elementary school together all the way through, and I remember vividly I went to Catholic school my entire life up until college, and we would sit in a certain particular order, and whenever I was getting ready to leave, especially in the winter, I vividly remember me going to put my jacket on before we had walked out of the classroom as close as I could to her. We didn't sit that close together, but that's my first memory that I could recall, at least, and it goes all the way back to kindergarten. It's
And how old do you think you were in kindergarten? 6? Yeah,
I don't
probably
know, how
6.
old are we in kindergarten? I'm honestly not sure.
I remember being 9 in third grade, so 8, second, 7. So kindergarten would be 5, 6.
5, 6. That's
Yeah,
interesting that
5,
we're pretty
6.
aligned there.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah,
aligned. Yeah, I think mine was exactly that, by 4 years old, or
that's so
I don't think I
wild.
can really recall something very vividly prior to preschool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious. This is, I mean, totally random. I love the background. Like, what is like, what does like fashion or hats in particular mean to you? Like, where does this come from?
Uh, I've been wearing hats since I was a little boy. Some of the
Mm,
earliest memories and pictures of me were me in a fireman hat, in a policeman hat, and cowboy hat. I've always worn hats, and which is really funny because I'm a man of multiple hats, and this is who I am. I'm a man of many hats. I I have many interests, hobbies, passions, expertise. And so it's
Mm,
kind of funny. It's very metaphorical that I actually like hats, grew up with hats, but I'm also a man of really actually many hats.
mm,
But for me, it's always been the different, I guess, phases of my life, but also the different personalities that and passions that I have in the form of something I'm wearing. So let's say, for example, um, I support a group of artisan women in Oaxaca, Mexico, and they produce all these the hats that are in the top part there. They're very simple. They're very simply made, along with these pom poms and stuff, and
yeah.
um, and obviously different events and different moods, and also different places that I would go to would warrant wearing a different color. you know
Mm,
um, Now if the events that I go to are more particular to a certain style, like this kind of, I don't know, dark red with a
I
pink
like
is
that hat.
more like
Yeah.
the afternoon picnic when you're wearing pink, and or feel like you're dapper wearing a suit for an afternoon, polo match type situation. And this guy right here I got in Panama uh, while I was there. I have a Panama Jack somewhere here too, but it was something I needed to wear at the time that I didn't want anything too big. So when I was dancing salsa, that I wouldn't like block my hand, because when I wear these things, it's impossible to dance partner dances because you're hitting your partner in
I'm
the
sorry.
head. Your arms are swinging up in the air. It's especially when you're dancing with a shorter partner. It'll be definitely not the right thing to do. And then there's this one which I made myself.
Oh,
Took 2 days
sick.
to make. Yeah, and I, it's called Volume Zero because it was the first hat I've ever made. And but my friends call it Toasted Marshmallow because my plan was to make it white. And if you, as a novice, you're figuring out how the heck do you keep your hats white when you're in the shop and there's so much stuff flying around. And you know what I said? So my hat instructor, hat workshop instructor was like, I don't think this is going to turn perfectly white, dude. We're gonna have to like give a vintage flavor or something to it because it's not going to be perfectly white. So
It works. It works.
yeah.
And maybe that wasn't such a random question after all, because there
Yeah.
was some deep meaning there. It leads me to ask you this. You talk about being an individual that wears many hats. Figuratively or however you want to frame it. Do you feel like you have to become a master of a hat before wearing another?
Ooh, that's a great metaphorical way to ask that question. I don't think you have to be a master completely, but I think you have to know enough to be able to then be a teacher of
Mm,
said hat or function, so to speak. And I say that as somebody who's a lifelong learner, but also a teacher and a mentor and a coach myself. I think it's important to have a bit of a background and knowledge, and of course wisdom, to be able to then share with other people. And if you're just beginning that journey, it's harder for people to, number one, believe you in the first place, that you know what you're saying and doing. Number two, wanting to then trust to follow you in your words and your actions, because you're also just beginning your journey. And three, more than anything else, I think it's there's this sense of I guess confidence from the teacher's perspective to really say, like, I'm confident to either A, know what I'm talking about, or B, not know what I'm talking about.
mm,
And I think every teacher, every Sherpa, every guide, those who are good and those who truly are teachers among inside themselves, are the first ones to be the students and say that, and be able to admit that there's things that they don't know.
sure.
And so it takes deep wisdom and presence of, let's say, said hat, to be able to admit that there's something that you don't know.
Absolutely. What's your favorite thing to teach?
Ooh, gratitude.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've spent the past 7 years really studying the art, the science, and the practice of gratitude. And I'm on my third year of working on a PhD specifically on gratitude. And I think I've spent enough time and practice to be able to really know a lot about it from the science side, but also from the practical side, and what works, what doesn't, and be able to just be it. And I think the beautiful thing about somebody that's in the state of gratitude on a regular basis is that you don't necessarily have to teach people how to do it. You just are it. And when you are,
Mm.
people just see it from you and just you just emulate and they just understand.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything else.
Yeah, I want to share something with you that was actually shared with me on the show a while back. Actually, um, I was at a point in my life, and maybe I'm still at this point, but maybe a little bit further down the road, where I just didn't feel grateful for much. I mean, and listen, I have a lot to be grateful for. Like, I don't want to sound like an ungrateful brat, you know? Like, let's call it what it is. I have a lot to be grateful for, but at the same time, I don't know. I just felt like I wasn't really grateful. And I was sitting across from Anil Gupta, who's
Mm,
Mike Tyson's former happiness coach.
mm,
And he looked at me and he says, we were having a similar conversation. He said, Matt, he was like, "Are you a righty or a lefty?" And I said, "Well, I'm a righty." And he goes, "Okay, if I told you that I was coming to New York City today and I wanted your left hand, would you give it to me?" And I said, "I mean, no. Like, why? I wouldn't want to give up my left hand." And he goes, "Okay, so you're grateful for your left hand." And yeah, I guess I'm grateful for my left hand because I don't want to give it up.
mm,
What are your thoughts on that? Like that was kind of my way of like trying to instill gratitude. I had to like go through the back door.
Interesting. Well, when it comes to gratitude, what we found and what I found in research is that you have to be held accountable for that gratitude for the initial period of time that I studied it. And funny enough, I began really getting fascinated about gratitude because there was a period of time that I had a girlfriend that was funny out of nowhere asked me, it's like, okay, what are you grateful for today and why? And I said, well, I'm always grateful. I'm Filipino. I mean, we grew
Mm,
up in a life of gratitude and resilience, knowing that when I was growing up, there, if a typhoon passes by and wipes out a whole town, you just rebuild back and be grateful that you're alive. And
yeah,
you walk out, in a land of have and have nots on a regular basis, you walk out that door knowing that you're going to see somebody right away that doesn't have something you have, you know, but they could easily be happy and because they're grateful for the fact that they have a life that they're living. And so I would defend myself. It's like, why do I need to like specifically tell you? She was, because it's important that you be held accountable for not just the experiences of what makes you grateful, but for this moment in time. The why is the most important because it makes it real.
mm,
And I said, huh, okay. So, her and I were together for almost 2 years. And when we broke up, right around right around Valentine's Day of 2015, I think, there she left a bit of loneliness inside of me of this person that kept on asking me this question and
mm,
holding me accountable for it. And so a few months later, I decided to just, I don't know, to put it on Instagram for some strange reason. And that's how daily gratitude started. Like what I do every single day, I write down what I'm grateful for and why to hold myself accountable for whatever it is that I'm grateful for today. And then have people see it because now it's on the internet. Now it's real.
yeah,
And so it's funny because as the months passed by, you had people following me and saying like, "Hey, I get up every morning. I wait to see what you're grateful for because then it reminds me to also be grateful." I had a guy once tell me that, I made a song because I started following you. So I made a song about gratitude and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And then and I was wondering about that, and so, because as you know, it's become a little bit a kitschy thing to be like, "Hey, be grateful," hashtag gratitude. But when people try to do that, it goes one ear and the other. It actually doesn't hold ground. And so
mm,
the question I ask people all the time is to say, okay, what are you grateful for? And they're like, blah, blah, blah. Then I ask them, then why? And they're like, because. No, no, no. Pause for a second. Be in this moment. Ask yourself why you're grateful for that thing and give me an answer. And then they're
mm,
like, oh. I actually have to think about this. Well, you should. If you're setting an intention, particularly that is with gratitude, you need to pause and really think about it and not let it be a flighty moment, because then it's
Yeah,
not real.
I get it. I guess I don't know. I feel like sometimes when I deliver the why as to why I'm grateful for something, like I could tell you why I'm grateful for my parents who are both
Hmm.
still alive, but that doesn't necessarily provoke feeling inside of me. Does that make sense? Like,
True,
does it need
but
to provoke feeling?
not necessarily. I mean, gratitude is technically among the perma scores in positive psychology to be a positive emotion. But the most interesting thing about gratefulness, particularly, and there's sometimes a line between when people say gratitude and gratefulness, because it's about being in the state of the moment. And what they've shown is that out of every variable or emotion that's out there, being in the state of gratitude is the only thing that actually has no negative polarity,
Mm,
meaning that you can be happy and you can still be sad. You can be joyful and still have some anger because, like, yeah, we win, but there's a side of anger. But gratitude, or in the state of gratefulness, once you're truly in it, is the only kind of feeling or variable that occurs in your body where there's no negative polarity, because you can't be grateful and then ungrateful at the same time. It
yeah.
literally is the only one. And some of the scientists will say that there is one thing that is similar to that, which is being in the true state of mindfulness. It's being in the state of this meditative moment. So besides this state of meditative moment or enlightenment, as people will call it, being in that state of gratitude also brings you there. You don't necessarily have to have a feeling. You're just in this moment. And if it makes you pause and stop, that's all it really needs to do.
Sure. I think that's where I was getting caught up. So I appreciate you breaking it down like that because it led me to feel like I was being ungrateful because I didn't feel anything coming up. So, for example, if I was like, I don't do this anymore, but if I were to be writing down, three things I'm grateful for in the morning, a very, I don't want to say cliche, but a habit that's, promoted all over the internet and on podcasts and on this and on that. So I, started doing that. But as I'm writing these things, I'm like, well, I don't feel anything coming up as I'm writing this. Like I don't actually feel grateful for writing down that I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. Am I grateful that I have a roof over my head? Of course. I would not prefer the opposite. And I'm not trying to be insensitive to anyone that does experience that. But I guess it always led me to feel like I wasn't grateful because there was a lack of feeling. And I've been on the other side of the spectrum. I'll give you an example. Literally just this weekend, I was laying down with my girlfriend and I started to cry right in front of her as I
Mm,
was holding her. And I was like, I just feel so grateful for what we have.
mm.
And tears were in my eyes. And I'm like, wow, that to me is gratitude. But I appreciate you breaking it down and just saying, like, hey, like, gratitude is also not experiencing, that range of emotion.
Yeah, because now you're mixing in emotion. That's not just gratitude that you're feeling. You're
Hmm.
feeling deep joy now.
Yeah.
Now you're mixing those things two up. So I think it's really an interesting, and people will always have this conversation with me about this. I was like, but am I supposed to feel that? Like, yes, you are, but also it's about being in the state, and not
Hmm.
necessarily about to feel something. Because now when you're crying, now you're feeling sadness
Hmm.
because of the joy that you're hearing. Now you're feeling that joy and sadness simultaneously. But initially it was sparked by gratitude.
Yeah.
So is it the gratitude you're really feeling, or the joy and the sadness that you felt after that gratitude that you started?
That's
It really is
interesting.
a sparker.
Yeah. I love this, man. This is a really great conversation so far. Uh well, let me I don't want to throw a curveball here and I don't mean for this to come off as a curveball, but just for the sake of conversation purposes, I'm sure you get a ton of questions, but what's a question that you wish more people would ask you?
Hmm. What is it that you really want?
What is it that you really want?
Yeah. And I say this is because I think for as somebody who is multifaceted, as somebody who is multi hyphenate in the true form, somebody who's a polymath, for me, I sometimes I experience this overstimulation of knowing and being good at so many things,
Mm,
to the point that I have to ask myself, out of all these things, what is it that I really want? And it's tough because at many different periods of times, it's different.
mm,
And I have to stop myself, or the universe has to stop me and ask me, what is it that you really want? And I think this is the, sometimes I wish some people ask me, well, you hire a business coach and they ask you that because that's what they get paid to do. So, 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 so that's, or a coach in general. I mean, I ask this question with people that I coach myself, is like,
mm,
what is it you really want? And that, if you haven't really thought about it, it'll take you back. It'll make you like think like, why are you asking me this question? That's rather quick.
yeah.
Well,
Well, what is the answer for you? Like, what is it you want? I mean, the question that comes up for me when I hear you say this is like, all right, someone that wears as many hats as you do, someone that's teaching gratitude, mindfulness, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what are you looking to get out of it? Like, what are you looking to do with that? Like the impact that you're looking to make on the world. Like, what is that shift that you're trying to make? I'm just curious if that feels like it aligns with what you're saying.
I think in the end, in the end, I want to leave a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be remembered. And I think this is what kind of drives everything. And I want to be remembered for doing something good or being a good person. And I think
Yeah.
that's sometimes not as easy as everyone thinks it is. Oh, I can just be a good person. I just like, I, I contribute to charity. I do philanthropic work. Blah, 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 blah. But does that really make you a good person, or are you doing this to check a box?
Mm.
And so, what is your purpose behind it? What is the reason and the why you do it? And for me, it's because what I really want is to be able to not just have me, my name, my family's legacy out there as truly making a difference in this world, but also making a difference in this world for something specific,
Yeah.
then to be remembered for it. And
Absolutely.
as somebody like I, as we both talked about, wearing so many hats, it's like it gets the waters get muddy
Mm-hmm.
because now there's so many things there. But in the end, how do you amalgamate everything so that then you're everything you're doing is heading in one direction? And for me, it really is to the point that where I can be remembered as somebody who's really a good human being that also happens to be Filipino and is a symbol of what a true, who we are as Filipinos, as caregivers, as as people who leave their families to take care of other people, and like how is that embodied completely, and what are the lessons learned from that, where we are givers and everything, but then also how do then we take care of ourselves,
Mm.
and and finding that balance needs a purpose, needs an anchor. And so then you ask yourself, then why are you doing it in the first place? What do
Yeah.
you really want? So you have to, these are the questions I constantly ask myself, or you bring people in to ask you.
Absolutely. You just having this conversation with you, you're provoking another question that I've never asked and potentially I've never even thought of before. Um, I had to write it down because I'm sitting here and I'm like, holy shit, like where did this even come from? But I literally no, I just wrote it down. It says, how do you ensure you're remembered without having to be removed or leaving a
Mm,
situation? Right? Like we can be grateful for someone, or and it goes back to what we just talked about in regards to like how I was taught gratitude by Anil Gupta. Like removing something then allows you to be grateful for it, but how do we ensure we're remembered without being removed or without leaving a situation? I mean, it comes up in relationships all the time. Someone takes you for granted while you're in the relationship, and then next thing you know, you break up, and they're like, "Wait, like I couldn't believe you were that good to me." How do we ensure we're remembered while we're still here?
mm. You ask yourself, are you doing everything you can each moment, each
Mm,
day, each waking hour to be truly authentic to who you are, so that then the person and the people that are around you will know who that is, and will and you'll be in their top of the mind every single time.
mm,
if you're kind to people, people will remember that. And if you're kind to people all the time, they'll really remember that, even
Yeah.
if you're around them. So that whether you're in that situation or when you leave or you disappear from it or you're removed, they'll be like, you know what? I, I, I'm trying to figure out what that guy looked like again. I'm trying to figure out, like, I knew he wore some funky stuff like hats, but you know what? I always remember, like, that he always like greeted me in the morning and said hello,
Mm.
or um, or always got me these little trinkets everywhere because he remembered me. And I think I try to live my life like that every single time, and particularly giving the attention, the time, and space to those that are behind the scenes in the shadows, the people that work, the custodians, the secretaries, the
Mm.
admins, the the nurses, and I've found such magic of just making sure that everyone is treated the right way with kindness, that you don't have to do some drastic thing to then be remembered, because all you're doing is being you every single day and showing that which who you are really inside. And you have to have done the work. If you don't haven't done the work, then what you're projecting out is bad stuff. But if you've done the
Mm.
work and say, okay, I know who I am and I'm happy who I am and I'm just going to be, and then everyone then sees that, observes, and then I give people trinkets from my travels because I want to, not because I want to be known and be like, oh, he's so great. No, just because it's good for me. It makes me feel
Mm.
better. It's nothing to do with like trying to have people look at me and say, hey, he's such a cool guy who's giving me stuff. No, it's for me. I just I remembered you with this little, I don't know, something from Mexico or Guatemala or Africa, and then it's now in your desk, and you'll see this. That's like, you know what, that guy was a really nice person.
I love that. It feels good to give, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I love
absolutely.
giving. Yeah, I love giving. I'm curious. You mentioned the term, the quote unquote work. What is the work to you?
I think the work is the journey towards enlightenment that many of us are seeking. And it
Mm.
doesn't have to necessarily be religious. It's just knowing and being aware of what maybe your weaknesses are, but also understanding what your strengths are, and then going deep within it and understanding how you can be better as a human being to other human beings. And I think many people, especially since pandemic, have been going to places that allows them to get started with the work, whether it's going to a Tony Robbins event or whether going to the middle of the jungle in Peru. And I'm all for that. But sometimes, particularly in this day and age of social media, I think a lot of people are claiming that they're doing the work, but really what they're doing is making sure they're in a situation that seems kind of cool so they can take photos of, but
Mm.
rather actually doing it. And it's not about going to Bali for a month and suddenly coming back as a guru. It's a lifelong process. And there's too many, unfortunately, there's too many out there. And not nothing but love for all my brothers and sisters that are going through the journey. But sometimes I got to say, hold your horses.
Mm.
I mean, the greatest teachers in the world didn't just wake up one day and believe that they were the greatest teachers in the world. They're greatest teachers because they have so many failings that they've experienced and so many challenges with the wisdom they've had that they had to question themselves what they're worth many times and then be okay with what they're actually worth.
Well, that's a good thing to know because I definitely question myself many, many times over. So it sounds like I'm on a good track. Oh, I love this. No, that's beautiful. I guess what did the journey to enlightenment look like for you? I mean, I could speak very transparently and say that for me, it was really turning inward and facing the shit that I didn't even know existed. But from your perspective, what did that journey look like, or what does it look like? Because I
Ooh.
mean, listen, does it ever end, right?
It never ends, first of all. And then second, I think I was, once again, I think blessed with curiosity in a little
Mm.
town in the Philippines. Even though I was born in New Jersey, and by the time we moved to the Philippines when I was like 2 or 3, it really was for me uh, reading these books of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and going through these adventures, these mysteries they're solving, and then alongside it, the mysteries of Earth that was happening, Rapa Nui, Easter Island, Chichen Itza, the seven wonders of the world, and so for me, a journey, and then add to that the after the curiosity, the discipline of martial arts, and that wisdom, and my dad having all these books about Shaolin monks and kung fu, and these books that had drawings of these monks that would tie lead slippers and jump up and down these holes, and seeing the philosophies that are out there. And so at such a young age, beginning at 4 or 5, I was already curious and wondering what else was out there. And so now you have to give yourself discipline to go through that. And and as we talked about earlier in intuition, that led to me by the age of 12 teaching this thing that I first experienced 5 years prior to that, which was just opening your mind and seeing nothing but white, to be still, to now experiencing something called the Silva method, where I found myself reading a newspaper during a Sunday brunch back in Manila, and seeing an ad for something that said, increase brain power and get better grades. And I was like,
Mm.
what is this? My mom said, this is a ploy, this is a cult. I thought, Mom, I think I want to do this. And it turned out to be a program called the Silva method. And the Silva method was brought in just like Tupperware was across Southeast Asia, particularly, and really was targeting kids or teenagers that would help them get better grades. And, especially since we're all type A in Asia. And ironically enough, that then led me to be able to then harness whatever I learned when I was 7 with the meditation and the martial arts, but then in real time, especially when challenges occurred. So now it's practicing the work I was learning, where like, okay, I'm going through a life challenge. Okay, how do I get back? Okay, I anchor, I think of this thing. What I learned from Silva. Okay, now we're back in this phase. Okay, good. So okay, we'll go through the challenge. And so it's practice. That's why it's called practice. I think many
Mm.
people think that when you learn a skill, it's like, oh, I learned it, I'm good. No, you have to practice. You really do. That's what it is. And then so I learned the Silva method, and which is funny because 20 plus years later, I found myself face to face with the daughter of the guy that started the Silva method in a resort in Dominican Republic, because I went to my first ever A Fest, or now was formerly known as Awesomeness Fest, which was an event hosted by a company called Mind Valley, which now I'm a very big part of for almost 10 years now. But going back to that, I was 14, and by the time I was 16, a really dear friend of mine gave me a book called The Celestine Prophecy. Till this day, is my favorite book of all time, because it truly opened my eyes to combining the adventure of what is in South America, looking for these kind of sea scroll type situations, but then also understanding kind of the religious aspect of it and the spirituality aspect of it, and the findings of that journey. So now it combined me, the 5-year-old kid reading Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, and Encyclopedia Britannica, but in a story that I'm following at an age that now I'm questioning things, and I'm asking, what's out there, what's bigger, what's next, and then doing the work myself, as we talked
Mm.
about practicing things. And so it was always fascinating for me that each thing came at the perfect period of time in my life, which then allowed me then to use that as I went through the rest of my life.
That goes back to divine timing, right? You just said
Which goes
everything.
back to divine timing. Absolutely.
It's so, I talk about this often because it's when you look back and you have 2020 whenever you look backwards, it's very hard to have 2020 in the present moment. It's a muscle that needs to be built. But when you look backwards and you have that 2020 vision, it's just like, all right, this is why things worked out the way it does, or the way it did. But divine time, it's like, I don't know. I personally still find it challenging unless I'm in a streak of things going quote unquote good to buy into divine timing. So it
Mm.
leads me to ask you, like, how do you trust the process, knowing that, and maybe you don't believe this, and that's okay, and there might be people that are tuned into this that don't believe it, but I'm a firm believer that there's a plan laid out for our life,
Mm-hmm.
right, from a greater power. And I'm just really curious to know, like, how you buy into said plan. Like, how do you trust said plan?
You just do. A plan is in place, and if you don't listen to the signs or are cognizant of what's going on around you and trust that those are signs for you, then
Mm,
you're going to miss the boat. And
mm,
it's worked so many times for me. It's allowed me to, you know, live the life I've lived. It's allowed me to to be able to get the dream job I've always aspired since I was a little kid. It's allowed me to know when to leave places, and it's allowed me to continue on with things that resonate with me, just like this personal growth journey. And so you just have to have trust. And once again, it's trusting your gut and having
sure.
that intuition to say, like, you know what, I think that's right. We so much are in our heads
Mm,
questioning things rather than trusting our gut and saying, like, this feels right. So that's why there's a difference when I, when I kind of work with people, I coach with people, or when I'm just having conversation with friends, between like the question, what do you think of that, compared to how does that feel?
yeah.
Because when it feels, there's this actual feeling that this gut feeling, this palpable situation that you say, you know what, I feel that that's the right decision.
Absolutely. How do we, or what do you suggest someone do when it comes to getting out of our head and into our heart?
First and foremost, take a breath.
Mm,
You don't have to go into a meditative state. You don't have to, do some crazy breath work unless that's something you need to get into this state. But one of the things that I've learned is really fascinating is, so that your head doesn't get in the way of it, is actually do some sort of strenuous activity,
mm,
even if it's jumping up and down for 5 minutes, jumping jacks, a bit of running, walking. That's why they say when you walk, your head gets clear. When people have meetings, Richard Branson is very notorious for having meetings while he's walking, because it gets him out of his head, because your head has to think about how your body works.
mm,
Now your heart has to be able to answer the question, because that's what you feel. And so ironically, activity plus number two, activity itself increases the blood flow to your brain, allowing your brain to now just be expansive because there's more oxygen. But really, it's also allowing your brain to just chill out,
mm,
because it is getting air, it is getting breath. Meanwhile, your heart's like, okay, which is really the second, has the second most number of nerves in our system, is now helping you make these decisions.
I
So
love that.
so it's not rocket science. It's, you know that's why when I remember, going to many of Tony Robbins' events, and before he lets you go into a certain practice that he's going to do, or makes you listen to his lecture, he'll make you jump up and down. He's very
Yeah,
famous to do the raise the roof situation, and then he'll go, do this, because then you're like, okay, then you're like, you're up, you're like, you're energized, you're breathing, you're ready to listen.
absolutely.
Brain's not
Um,
trying to fight it anymore.
did you go to UPW? Which
Yeah.
events did you do? Yeah, I love UPW.
UPW, Business Mastery. I went to UPW live once. You went to UPW online twice, and Business Mastery twice. And not just Tony. I'm very blessed to be able to go on this journey and attend many different seminars from many different gurus, so to speak, but also myself be part of that, as the person on stage. So.
Yeah, I love that. You talk about the process that you were just alluding to in regards to like getting out of our head and into our heart as not rocket science. And I agree with you, but it's also not the default, right?
Mhm.
It's not for many people, and maybe for some it is, right? Based on culture and things of that nature. How do we start to make that shift to it become our default? And of course, you could rebuttal and just say practice right away, but there's also a level of like being comfortable with even getting to the point of wanting to shift our default and what's our quote unquote norm. So what's your take on that?
What you need to do, I think, which each of us need to do, is first of all be aware that we want to go through the process
Mm,
and shift. If we can't decide ourselves that we want to go on a shift, you just you just go in a battle that's not going to be won.
Mm.
Number two, have people around you that are going through the same journey that will support you, but you support them too. There's no better way to learn and to also be humbled than supporting somebody else going through something.
Yeah.
And if they're trying to go and grow and you are too, then surround yourself with them. Because if you're the one person that's trying to grow, that's taking these classes, that's listening to his or her heart more, but then the five people that are around you are all pessimists and don't really believe in what you're doing, then you're just trying to do it yourself. But then
Mm.
if you go and okay, you have your crew of friends that are like, you're the weird one, you're the one that's trying to learn. It's cool, fine to be weird, but guess what? My elevation and consciousness is going to be way beyond everybody else that's calling me that weird. Because when I go hang out with these other people, who also everyone calls in their immediate group are weird, they turn out to be now we all turn out to be normal.
Mm.
We're surrounded by people who are just one level above.
Right. Right. Yeah, that aligns with me. I appreciate this tremendously. I only have you for a few more minutes, though. I wish I had you for longer.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
gonna. Time goes quick, man. Time goes quick,
Yeah.
especially when you're enjoying it.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't even think about that. Like I know there was something that was written like at the bottom of your email that said if you want to take longer, um, write something or say something. And I was like, don't you just go? I mean, the time is booked, so then you just continue.
oh, listen, I can keep going. I can go on for days, but I'm here to respect your time. So if you want to go longer, we can go longer. But
You go a little bit
um,
longer. Yeah, I'm
okay,
this for me is that if we're almost already there, I mean, this is a great conversation. So
I appreciate that.
I like it. You're asking me the right questions, and I'm able to answer them, and I'm able to ask you the right questions too. So it's like
I
it
appreciate it,
works.
man.
It's
We're
more a
having fun.
fireside chat than it is an actual podcast interview.
Well, that's the thing. It's a conversation, right? I think ultimately, I mean, I've been doing this for 5 years now, or almost 5 years. We're not quite at 5 years, but at a certain point, you realize it's just like it's more impactful for the community you're building when you're just talking
Yep.
versus anything else. So I say this in full transparency. I would never invite someone on my show that I'm not interested in learning from. So
Hmm.
I don't prepare for these episodes. Like I have known your work for quite some time. I've, followed what you've done professionally, what you put out on social. And of course, this is from an outsider's perspective. I'm obviously not working with you. I'm not with you every single day. So what I do see, it's obviously of interest, and I just come here with 5 questions that I ask everyone for the most part. I didn't even get to ask you one, which is how are you? We kind of just like jumped into things. Um,
You know what's funny you say that is because I was once on I went home to the Philippines I think last year or so, and I found myself invited by the most well-known talk show host in the Philippines.
mm,
And at that time he was still trying to figure out stuff because obviously pandemic hit him hard, so they didn't really have like a studio especially in the Philippines. So most of the things were broadcasted on the internet rather than being like at a TV studio. And it was funny because we went I think 90 minutes. I think the interviewer or whatever went 90 minutes, and he had 10 questions, and he only was able to ask me one. And then he said, "By the way, we still have like they said like 10 minutes. Like the person goes 10 minutes left, and then he looks at this thing and he goes, I just asked you question number one. We're not even like to the rest of the nine here."
mm,
I was like, I guess we have to do another episode. And he goes, we're definitely going to have to do another episode. So it's like,
that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Free
yeah,
flowing conversation is the best. I mean, there's nothing better than it. It's
there's
organic.
nothing
It's
better than it.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. This was actually asked to me by Dr. Michael Gervais, who
Mm-hmm.
works with the Seattle Seahawks. And him and I were having a conversation, and he threw this question at me. I had zero clue how to answer it at the time. So I said, you know what? What's better than not knowing how to answer it and then just asking everyone else that comes on the show? So it's not to stump you, but I mean, you've given us a lot already. And I'm just curious to know what you would say if someone had approached you and said, hey, Erwin, if I knew what you know, how would my life be different?
Mm. If you knew what I knew, then you'd wake up every day with a sense of purpose
Mm,
with a gleaming amount of passion and with the ability to take action for that purpose and that passion to make an impact on somebody else's life.
Mm. How did you get to that point? Like, where did you ever feel like you were not at that point?
Mm, I think I always was. I'm
Okay.
one of those rare unicorns that, and this is why I have so much energy. I guess the one thing that I've known, that I've finally taken more awareness to, as I slowly have stepped into really admitting to my greatness and what it is that I give to the planet, is a certain amount of energy,
Yeah.
and the energy that I have as I walk into a room, whether the energy has to do with the fact that I'm wearing a big hat when nobody else is, or the energy, the fact that I just smile or have a laugh that fills up two different floors. It's or if a song comes up and I just feel comfortable with myself about vibing and dancing, or if the song is something I'm really familiar with, to just randomly grab somebody and dance with them because I'm comfortable with that, while other people will be like, "Oh, I'm not really sure I want to do that."
Mm.
And by being very comfortable with who I am, I'm able to then emit this energy that I have because I know and I'm aware of what my capabilities are. I'm aware of what my weaknesses are, but I'm also not afraid to act on it because I know that everything I do has not only purpose, but also a sense of kindness and
Mm.
a gifting situation to it. It's like I never really have any ill will against anybody, and I haven't in a while. And waking up every day, taking a breath with my hand on my heart, just to be grateful that I'm alive, is enough for me to charge my engines and say, okay, how can I make an impact on somebody else's day today? At least one.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place to get there, because this is a gift. It's most definitely a gift. This is a gift, just having this conversation. Um, you talked, you said very briefly that you got to a point where you're able to admit your greatness. If someone's tuned into this right now and, they know they have that greatness within, we all do, it differs, and that's what makes us beautiful, right? We're all very different at the same time, very much so the same. If someone feels they have that greatness within them and they're scared to admit it. That I don't know, they feel like it might be braggadocious, or maybe they're just scared of what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them?
Well, somebody asked me this the other night. I was dropping off a friend, and she was so curious about the fact that I've, you know, really for the past almost 20 years been working with professional athletes and
Mm,
in various sports, and they said, what do you think is the biggest challenge that people you work with, whether they're athletes, they're startup founders, they're CEOs, they're high performers, basically, in other words, what do you think is the biggest challenge that, in a sense, stops them from being the greatness that they are? And I immediately answered, it's fear.
mm,
And she was like, fear of success. Absolutely. Because yes, we all fail, but when we make it, we don't know what that's like
mm,
until you get there. And so when you actually fail, when you actually like get to where you want, you're like, what do I do? Like, I made it. Like, now you're like a deer with the headlights on. But, you're just like, now I'm here. What do I do? Meanwhile, when you're fearing success or fearing failure, you'll go through. Everyone goes through failure, so you're
mm.
kind of familiar with it. So it's the fear of
Furthermore,
success. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, furthermore, just to add to that, when you make it and you succeed, you also have to worry about who didn't come with you, right? There's a sense of aloneness, right?
Yes. And remember, the higher you climb up on the mountain, the lonelier you get.
Mm,
And this is once again the challenge of those of us that are on this journey doing the work. As you climb up the mountain, the people now that you can have conversations with, that you're not getting judged and feel safe having conversations, get smaller and smaller.
mm.
And so now that success you have, and that's why most big names, so to speak, whether they're authors, whether they're personalities, celebrities, actors, singers, they they end up going through depression,
Yeah.
and they need support because why? They're now in a place where nobody else is,
Yeah.
and so now nobody can help you.
Absolutely. When it comes to your 20 years of experience working with high performers, whether that be athletes or high level CEOs or anything in between, I'm really curious. And I'm going to more so ask from the athlete side of things because
Yeah.
I personally played sports. Was there ever resistance to mindfulness or gratitude or what you were teaching them? And the reason I ask this specifically is because when you're playing AAU basketball, your coach isn't teaching you mindfulness or gratitude. When you're playing high school basketball or college basketball, it's also, I mean, maybe now it's a little bit different. Was there any resistance?
There always is resistance, and there
Okay.
will be resistance on a constant basis. It doesn't matter how high you get on the food chain of sport. Not everyone's going to vibe with you.
Mm,
And this really, it's as simple as that. And the, the thing that I've learned, particularly as a teacher, as a guide, as a Sherpa, particularly in the world of personal growth and mindfulness and breath work and all that stuff in the world of sport, is that all we can do as teachers is plant the seed.
mm,
And we don't know how long it's going to take for that seed to grow. All you can do is plant the seed. You have to let it grow on its own. And when the plant is growing and it has to go through storms, then you're the person that then provides the shelter if that plant wants it.
yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge, where the resistance comes from the fact that not only of the unknowing and the unawareness of these athletes to what you're trying to teach them, but it's also the presentation. If that person, so to speak, is whoever, the teacher, the guide, Sherpa, the coach, isn't that person, and they're trying to teach that stuff, athletes will see it right away. Like,
Mm,
who are you trying to be, dude? That's not who you are. But if you embody it, if you're a mindful person, you're a person filled with gratitude, an athlete will look at you right away and be like, you know what? I like what he's drinking.
yeah.
I like his vibe. Once again, we're going back to vibrations and energy. It's like, I like his vibe. I want to know what makes him tick.
Mm,
I want to know what his source of energy is and his vibration is.
yeah. I'm curious as the teacher, did you ever feel rejected when someone that you were trying to work with or knew that or someone that you knew could benefit from what you are teaching? Did you ever feel rejected from that?
Yeah, many times.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is let go of that. Let go of
Mm,
your ego. What you have to do is be like, hey, I'm here to teach. And if that resonates with you as an athlete that wants to learn, cool. If not, like I said, I'm merely planting the seed.
mm,
Take yourself out of the situation. Be there for that, because there's going to be one day, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years down the line. Now the athlete's going to give you a call and be like, hey, remember that thing that you were teaching us, that little breath work thing that we're trying to do, that setting of intentions that we're going to do? I want to do that. Like, yeah, I'm dating this girl now, and like she's into it. And I said, yeah, I did that before. We had this guy come in. He was kind of funky, you know? So you have to take yourself out of the situation. Let it not be you. Remove your ego and say, I'm merely here to share the message. It's up to you if you want to take it right now or maybe take it later.
it always comes down to someone starting to date someone, and then it's like, you know what, they're into it. That's what it always comes down to, right? It's like,
Imagine how languages are learned. Like, I think I've learned so many languages because I've dated, women from all over the world. And,
mm,
suddenly found an interest, like really deep interest, dating a Brazilian girl. And next thing you know, I'm like suddenly becoming an expert in Portuguese, like, or Russian. I had a Russian girlfriend once, and suddenly like, I'm wanting to learn everything about Russian, so like, it's like that. It's a language.
well, it's, yeah, I mean, we could definitely find motivation in that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's crazy. Life is wild. Life is fucking wild. I'm doing something new on the show. I stole this idea, and I openly admit that I stole it from Stephen Bartlett and what he does on his podcast,
Mm.
Diary of a CEO or whatever
Sidear
it's called.
CEO. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I love what he does at the end of his shows. He asks a question to a past guest to ask a future guest without knowing who's who.
Mm.
And
Okay.
I have a question for you from our last guest. It was a very deep conversation.
It's about
Uh,
relationships with yourself, and that was
it,
kind of a funky one.
well, this is the question I'm about to ask you. This,
Oh, yeah.
it's, how do we know we are truly embodying our spiritual or life lessons
How do we know that we're truly embodying our spiritual and or life lessons?
and or life lessons?
Life lessons.
Yes.
When the people around you feel it.
Okay.
And I'll expound on that. And that's fine because I think, once again, going back to the personal growth, going back to doing the work, going back to what the journey is, if you've taken the time to actually reflect on each of the stages of your life and the ebbs and flow of the lessons that you've learned through each of the challenges and also the wins,
Mm,
and you reflect and you say, this is the changes I'm going to make in my life because of the lessons I learned, and then how then I call myself to action to it. How do then I embody it? And so if people around you feel that, once again, we're going back to vibes, we're going back to
mm,
vibrations. And I say that because I think, because many times people would always say, like, once again, I love your energy, or your energy will be missed, or like, I can't wait for you to come here because I just want to feel your energy. And it's not even like, I think most people will initially think of energy like, oh, I'm wild, I'm funky. No, it's not that. You just, like, I per se, I think I'm a combination of ultimate groundedness
mm,
radiating with like love in a
mm.
sense. And people feel it. And I know that I've done the work and I know who I am when everyone around me feels it and
Yeah.
yearn for it.
I love that. It's a good feeling when people love your energy, you
Yeah,
know?
and
That
I don't make it purposeful. I don't like do it on purpose. I make it purposeful. I don't do it on purpose. I don't like, hey, feel my energy. Like, I'm not the guy that comes into like a party going crazy because I want people to notice me.
yeah.
I come in grounded, big smile, hugs, but it's something. And once again, it's the people around me describe it. I can't describe it myself because I don't feel what other people feel.
Yeah, you
And
come
they
in
just
as
say,
you. You
I
come in
come in
as
as
who you are.
me, and they just like, oh, I love your energy. Like, I wish you were here all the time. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm not a lapdog, but sure, or, you know.
No, I get it. I get it. So the second part of what I have to do here is ask you to ask a question to our next guest without knowing who they
Mm,
are, because I don't even know who they
yeah.
are.
Okay. Okay. I knew that was coming, so I was trying to rummaging in my head already how to ask that. Is um, hmm, if you had one night left to live on this earth, what would your last meal be,
Mm. What would
and
yours be?
why? Last meal would be, and why? What would mine be?
Yeah.
Omakase sushi
From?
from Jiro, from that train station sushi joint in Tokyo that won a Michelin star.
I've
And he
never.
literally just, you watch it on Netflix. It's like Jiro does sushi or whatever. He's this like old dude that just, makes nothing but sushi. Goes to like the market in Japan early. Everyone knows who he is because he's like revered. They take like, I don't know, a day or half a day to make the proper tamago or egg. The
Mm.
process, the rice, they whole different process, and literally the most blasphemous thing you could do is if you put soy sauce in what he literally make each thing by hand, put it right there, and say eat it, and he'll just watch you, and you just have to enjoy that full flavor
I love
and
that.
just do that. And then, because you're truly in this moment of truly appreciating not just the flavors of the food, but all the work that Jiro and I think he's only like, there's only two people in his restaurant, two or three people. Literally enjoy the work that these three people did for you to have that one bite.
That is insane.
And so it's the embodiment of true like mindfulness when it relates to food. And I said, okay, it's either that or straight up Korean barbecue. Just all you can eat meat at Let's Meat right in Koreatown. Just give, especially when it comes to the New York strip steaks that were like this thick. It's either one truly mindfulness situation, or B, like, give me more of that steak, please.
You know what? On the topic of food, I'm going to ask you this because this is something that I personally struggle with, and obviously, you embody mindfulness in numerous different ways. How do we become more mindful of when we eat? I've heard like numerous people speak on this, Ed Milet and whomever else, and I'm gonna be honest, man. Like when I eat like a fucking savage. Like I eat like I'm never gonna see another plate of food, And it's like, wait, like did you even taste what you ate? And I
Mm.
literally watch my puppy do this all the time. I put the bowl down and he
Oh,
just
yeah.
goes for it, like he's never seen food before, or it's gonna be his last meal. And I do the same thing. Like, how do we instill a level of mindfulness to taste and enjoy and just like be present with the gift that's in front of us?
Savor. There's uh, one of the topics that we had when I was doing my course in positive psychology was the topic of savoring. And it was
Mm,
really fascinating because what people forget is that yes, you're mindful, you're present in the moment, but savoring is taking the actual time to let all the senses that you're receiving from being mindful, but focusing on one thing.
mm,
Savoring is being in the moment and looking at a leaf or right now and like, I'm seeing this like, I don't know, is that a pear? That's like right outside my door, like a pear tree. It's not just a pear tree. The fact that there's a fruit that's blooming, and I see like the bee that's around there, and just like literally saving the moment. And then imagine now that taking that pear that you've just like visualized and like being in this moment, and then tasting it. You're like, this is what it is. It's everything I've seen, and now I'm feeling it.
mm.
And so sometimes people look at me funny because I'm just like, and then, I do this like, and they're like, it's either A, somebody be like, wow, that's way too much, dude. That's way too much info. That some people, or B, they'll be like, I love how much you love food.
Mm,
And I do. I'm a massive foodie. I think if I wasn't in the world I lived in, I probably would have been a chef.
mm,
I grew up, I think very lucky to have lived in Japan where they really love how to plate things and they love the presentation of everything and it's clean. And when I was younger, I remember making these ice cream. I was making ice cream banana splits, and I had to make sure that as I made the banana split, that the banana was cut perfectly. They're on the side, and I had the different flavors, and I would put like a cone to make it look like it's a character, and then I presented it, and I stared at it for a good 10 minutes. I didn't eat it until it started melting, and then okay, now it's destroyed. Now I can eat it. But I was savoring the moment and the time at a young age of enjoying the fact I created this work of art.
yeah.
And at the time, we didn't have phones, so I had to grab my camera and I tried to take a picture of it, but capture the moment. But then the moment, for me, I had to wait until it melted, that it got all disrupted, and then said, okay, now I can eat it.
Mm,
But then the time it's different from, let's say, for example, now fast forward to today, when something is being made for you, like an omakase where they just deliver one thing at a time. You have to remember everything that took for that one piece of whatever it is in front of you. And you do this and you're like, save this moment and then go through the process.
absolutely. I love that. I'm gonna ask you one last question, but before doing that, I just want, yeah, I need to let you go. I mean, I could, like I said, I could literally sit here all day.
There was one
Um,
time, I'll just tell you this is funny. As one time I was doing a podcast with one of the top kind of local New York Filipino podcasters, but they usually do like celebrities and stuff like that, Filipino, like especially older Filipino celebrities. And we were recording for like 3 hours. And I was like, "Are you guys even going to put all of this in it?" They're like, "Yeah, we're just basically having conversation." Like, it's already 2.5 hours. Like before we actually like figured out what time it was, 2.5 hours, and they said,
yeah,
"Let's fine, let's make it to 33 hours flat." So
go for 3 hours. You got to make an even number. But
yeah,
Yeah, I just want everyone to know that socials, websites, all of that good stuff will be in the show notes. Like, out of respect
Mhm.
for your time and all of the value that you delivered here, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Um, but I'm going to end with this question. This is how we end the show. You
Mhm.
know, Erwin makes it to whatever year he wants to make it to, right? He lives as long as he wants to live. He wears as many hats. He impacts as many people. As many people feel his energy. All of that good stuff. Like, it's all complete. And you could only be remembered for one piece of advice, not how you want to be remembered. But I'm more so referring to, if I, knock on wood, this is many, many years down the road, I walk past your tombstone and I think of Erwin and I'm like, all right, this is the advice I remember him for. What is that advice?
Hmm. It's the quote that I think I will always be attached to, which is, if nothing else, dream to inspire others.
Mm, I think
If
you've done
nothing
that
else.
tremendously today.
And if you're able to bring that across in every possible way, it's you've done your part on this planet.
I love that. Erwin, thank you so much for this opportunity, brother. This was an absolute blast. We're not going to hit 3 hours today, but we hit a little bit over an hour. So,
No worries,
expressing
no worries.
gratitude, brother. Thank you so much for this.
Of course, thank you, man. Thank you very much.